Yes, we all know the benefits of having the African Continental Free Trade Area. When you go through such a thing, there is always an adjustment cost. Tariffs were originally being used perhaps to support budgets and all that. Now, when you create a common trade area, it means that what happens is that you're going to you have to drop your tariffs all the way to zero. And so, therefore, in the initial case, you're going to take a hit if you are dependent on those tariffs for budget support or for development efforts and all that. Now, I think this must be seen short-term, intermediate, immediate, and the long-term. I would agree with you that, or everyone would agree that the long-term is beneficial. Short and in between, when you're going through the adjustment cost, what other countries have done, and yes, you're right that the smaller countries might take a bigger hit because they are the ones who perhaps depend more on these tariffs for support. So I think the AU should think about having some form of a compensation fund. Now, we have to think through that. And having a compensation fund means that countries that are going to lose some revenues, you help them a little bit as they go through the transition of an adjusting to the new reality, so that they are able to manage on the adjustment. I think COMESA did that. COMESA does have that fund. It's very helpful and beneficial. So, but then you also understand that if they are dependent on tariffs in order to survive, then perhaps there's a little bit of inefficiency. So therefore, industries or those who exports command or imports command some taxes, we have to go through diversification of the economy. That's the long-term thing that we need to do. And we heard this morning that also, that it's important that when we do the CFTA, we also have to not only look at trade, because trade is just a means to an end, but there are complementary issues that you have to tackle. What do we do about the question of currency? Because you're going to be faced with exchange rate risk, and most of our countries, our currencies are not convertible. So we all go through, perhaps even you coming here, George, I'm sure that if I look into your wallet, you have $1. You don't have the Rwanda money. So the question then is that these kind of issues we need to tackle. What kind of payment systems are we going to have? COMESA has a payment system, but Africa, most of our exports or trade, we have to wire it outside the continent and then bring it back. And I'll give you an example. One time I went for work, I was in Cairo, and we're talking to the ministry of, one of the ministries, and Egypt is a member of COMESA, and Egypt buys a lot of tobacco from Malawi and from another African country. And they were saying, the question is that, yes, we would like to trade more, but what kind of payment systems do we have? And so I think that kudos to our leaders. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a great thing that we have the CFTA. But I think in terms of implementation, we should begin to look at these things. Like the question you asked, the loss of revenue, if it's going up to 20%, it's large. If we're going to take a hit on exchange rates, what kind of payment system do you have? What kind of infrastructure, trade facilitation issues are we addressing here? So all these things should be integrated in a way that we are able to address it. But I think these are positive, and I'm very confident that if we come together and we put our heads together, these challenges, we'll be able to address them and move on so that our people, let's note, I'll just end on this, that the trade is good for itself, but note that it's a means to an end. A lot of us are poor. We need to uplift the poverty, and this is what China did it. Africa can do it if the will is there.
All right, I will let you go though. I'd like to press you on the matter on a multi-currency approach. The IFC has alluded to it. He mentioned even with the Rial, the rupee, the euro and the dollar, there's a possibility of an African currency, and they haven't tackled it as such. So if the IFC doesn't know how to go about it, then who does?
Well, I think, this whole idea, and I think what has happened, with the Grexit and Brexit, has put some people to question whether we need to have an African currency because of the challenges that is happening in the EU. But I would argue that yes, we do need a common currency, because it would, you don't need to have exchange rates. You have one common currency, and so therefore we need to address it. Where I think the issue is, it's not about the currency. I think the issue is, can we be disciplined in terms of the big economies? Because you know that they will drive any common currency that you have. Right. Because their economies are large, and therefore they are the ones, the South Africans, the Nigerians, the Algerians, the Moroccans, they are ones who are going to, lead the way. And so when there are shocks, I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, that when a big country coughs, you catch a cold. So if South Africa is more integrated, and which we should be integrated, if their economy catches coughs, then we, small countries like Rwanda and Ghana or Burkina Faso, are going to catch a cold. So we need then to put in systems in place to address that. But I'm pointing out this not to say that it's a negative. We need to begin working on that. We need to try to begin harmonizing our codes in terms of regulatory frameworks and all that. And as people are saying, we are not integrated enough. I mean, a lot of us are not able to even move around in terms of free movement of persons. I'm looking forward to a day when we would all be able to have a common African passport which would back up, and therefore I could be able to travel freely. And also a common passport that would allow me to say, if I come to Rwanda or I go to South Africa, nobody asks George, why are you coming here? I'm just coming to have a good time. Right? So these are the small things. And the one important point when it comes to regional integration issues, when it comes to AU matters, do you know what the AU does? This is an important point. You're doing trade for who? For the people. But the people don't know you. Right? So you have to find a way also to be able to sell the AU. And linked to this is the financing. Who is going to pay for this implementation? How are we going to do it? I talked about the compensation fund. Who is going to pay for it? And so all these things is linked to the sustainability of the financing of the union, which we did in Kigali 2 years ago. Kigali is getting a lot of praise for what you do. You did the financing, you now did the trade. But it's a question is that that's why Africans, we need to buy into it and begin to contribute our own and to become sustainable. Otherwise, all these things means nothing if you're going to have this and then turn around and go to another country, the Europe, and say, please help me finance it. No, we are capable. And people relate this to the question of the illicit financial flows, where we have currency, money leaving the country because of poor contracts and all that. I mean, it's been cited, Tabu Mbeke's report cites 50 million or billion leaving the country. These are loss of revenues to put up a good school somewhere in a neighborhood. So we need to think holistically. That's what I'm trying to say here. It's not only trade kudos to those who brought together, but let's put it together, complemented with institutions that would allow us to be able to do it. And Africa, I think we can do it. We have plenty. You mentioned DRC. The resources in DRC, Inga Dam could power the whole of Africa and even sell to the rest, right? So I think the will is there. No one is stopping us. No one is stopping us. The will is there, and I think people like you, the young generation, perhaps you should move us, kick us out of the way, and give you the strength, because I believe that you are not only you are not the future, you are now. You are now. You have to assume leadership. And you have to assume leadership because you have great ideas which would complement the CFTA, which will generate jobs for the youth, generate jobs for women, generate in a way that we become more sustainable, whereby we can, seize our own destiny in our hands. So I think it's a great thing that we're doing. It's a great thing that Africa did in 44 countries signing. Now we have to encourage them, go back to your parliaments and enact.